So you've got your embroidery design and it's got circles on it, but what stitches do you choose? Coming right up. So I'm going to show you 5 stitches that are really good for embroidering circles. I'm going to start nice and easy and we're going to work our way up to a little bit more complicated. So a nice simple one to start with and a little bit open. This one, so it goes in quite quickly. Just starting my thread off. I'm going to bring my thread out at the top of my circle and then I'm just going to make a little hole roughly where I think the middle is, about there. Just using a Malor lane tool to do that. You can use a big needle if you like. I'm going down into the middle. And I'm going to come up from the bottom. All these stitches will go down into the centre, so down the same hole in the centre. And then I'm going to come in from the right, in from the left. This is just a good way of marking where the stitches go without having to draw anything. So then we're going to halve that little quarter of a circle there, so I'm coming up on the edge of the circle roughly where I think the middle is. You don't need to measure it, you can just do it by eye. Same on the other side. Down into the centres, pull them quite tightly so that they open up that hole in the centre, and then all the way around that, so halfway between these 2 points and the last one, and you can choose how many of these you put in, so I shall go round in between each one now, down into the centre. The smaller they get, the easier it is to work out where halfway is. Just work my way around the shape. Middle hole will start to fill up, but that's okay, just keep taking it down into the middle. It's a little bit harder as you get back to where you started from. And then I'm going to finish that thread off and start the second thread because we need to cover up that outside circle. So to finish our eyelet wheel, we're just going to work some straight stitches around the edge. So I've just started another thread off, and now what I'm going to do is come up at the end of each of those spokes and just do a straight stitch to the next spoke. So the more spokes you have in, the more round this will look. And then I'm going to do a back stitch, so I'm coming up ahead at the end of a spoke, and I'm going to go back on myself and down that hole where that previous one ends, and just work a row of stitches all the way around the circle. I'm using 2 strands of a Lana thread. These are the Lanas that are available from the shop. So these are nice and soft to use for this, and I've just doubled them up just to give it a little bit more definition. So last couple in now. Can cover up those little starting stitches. And then to finish my thread, I'll just turn my frame over and weave it under some stitches on the back. So a really pretty simple stitch, very easy to work, this one, and that's an eyelet wheel. So I'm going to make a hole in the centre again for this one, because it's quite useful to know where the middle is. So, like so. So this looks similar to the eyelet wheel, but it has a slightly more decorative edge to it. So I'm going to start on the edge of my circle, down into the middle. I'm not pulling the thread all the way through, I'm just going to make a little loop, and I'm going to come up inside the loop, just a little step away from where I started, tensioning it by pulling that to the outside of the circle. Like so. Hold on to this one, back down in the centre of the circle, make the loop. You can see you're sort of holding the loop in the direction that I'm going. Come up on the edge, don't worry about the little starting stitch, coming up inside that loop. Pull that to the outside of the circle to tension it. We're just going to work our way around the circle doing the same thing. So don't pull the loop through, you need to come up inside the loop. Pull that thread to the outside, let go of the loop, pull it tight, and then this edge will cover the circle. So it looks similar to the first one, but slightly prettier edge on it. Here to where I started, so you just have to judge how wide to make these so they fit in. Get 2 more in, I think. And then to finish that one off, we need to just finish that stitch because it's not complete. So all I'm going to do is pull the thread over to where I started, just catch in that thread there. Pull that down tightly. Going to sneak a little stitch over that end one there. Oh, nice, easy, really pretty, quick wheel, so buttonhole wheels. This is a good one if you want to fill in your circle in a solid stitch, and it also comes up quite high, so you get a bit of texture as well. So this is Rhodes stitch. There's a couple of ways of doing this, so I'll show you both ways. And I can just put my starting knots right in the middle of this circle, because we're going to cover all of this, you won't see them. So right in the middle. Doesn't really matter when you start, but I suggest starting on a north, south or an east, west line, because we're going to go straight across the circle. And all we do now is we come back to where we started and just slightly to the right of it, or the left, doesn't really matter which way you go round. And we're going to cross over that first stitch and go down just to the other side of that stitch. So we're crossing over the previous stitch each time. Do these stitches quite close together. So we don't go straight on, we cross over, and this gets really textured in the middle. Get a nice high point in the middle. Cross over. Now what this does do is also makes it quite thick on the back as well, which may or may not matter depending on how you're finishing your piece. So I'll do a few more stitches this way and then I'll show you another way that we can do it. You'll see that start to form in the middle now. So we cross over, so it's crossing over in the middle each time, so it's going to get quite raised in the centre. So what we can do, if you don't want it to be so thick on the back, the thread on the back, and you want to use less thread as well, you might not have much thread to use, you can come up on the same side that you went down on and go back across the shape. Stay on the same side, come back across the shape. It's a little bit harder to get your edges as neat doing it this way, but it does use less thread and not so lumpy on the back. So you try both ways and see which you like. Just takes a bit more care this way. And what's quite important with this stitch, whichever way you do it, is when you get to the east-west direction, that you're going straight across from east to west. So you've done exactly half the circle. If you've gone too high on one side and not met it on the other side, then you've spaced your stitches out a little bit too far. So sort of use halfway point as a bit of a gauge to make sure that you're on the right track. Crossing over. So you can do it either way. It's not quite as neat on the edge doing it this way. So you have to come up close by, but not so close you come up through the same hole. So you choose. I'm going to finish that thread off as I've run out. It does use a lot of thread, this stitch. But I can just finish it in the middle. Start this one in this space. Carry on from where you finished. So I'm going to go round and round the shape, so opposite sides. Just because I think the edge is neater, but you can choose. So last stitch, I think, in there. See that beautiful pattern it makes where it crosses. So great one for filling in and a little bit of texture. So this stitch consists of two parts, so I'm going to do another stitch underneath and I'll explain why that is in a minute. But I'm going to use the same colour for both stitches. And this is going to be filled in as well, so another good stitch for filling in the whole circle. But unlike the Rhodes, this one will be nice and smooth, no texture to this one. So I'm just going to work a small stitch around the edge. I'm going to do a split stitch. I'm coming right on the outside of that line that I've marked. And I'm just taking a small stitch, coming up in the middle of the stitch, splitting the stitch, another little stitch forward, come back in the middle of the stitch. Just taking these small stitches all the way around. Try and make as neat a circle as you can, because this will affect the stitch that goes on the top. Cover your design line if you have one. And this is just going to help me keep a smooth edge to my satin stitch. And just raise it up ever so slightly, and it's just much easier to work it if you've got this underneath, so worth taking the time to do this. So I'm just going to go all the way around the circle with this and then we'll do the actual satin stitch. the last stitch just to connect those two, and I've got some thread left that I'm going to use, but it's a good idea just to do a couple of holding stitches just in case you have to cut the satin stitch out, then you've got to cut all the split stitch out as well. So I'm going to do a diagonal one across here. It doesn't really matter because it's a circle where you start, but it's just easier for me to see the diagonal, see it on the diagonal. So coming up right on the edge of that split stitch there, right across the middle point there, straight down the other side of that split stitch. So again, come up where you did your first stitch, right on the edge of that split, across the shape down the other side. Now you want this to look as smooth as possible, so just take your time to get the tension nice and even and get your stitches in the right place. You can see that nice smooth edge coming, and that's from the split stitch underneath. You don't have to do that, but I think it helps. Just check the tension when you pull it down, not too tight so it distorts the shape. I'm going to go all the way to one side. It's easiest to start in the middle because you can get your stitch right across the middle than it is to start with these smaller stitches on the ends. Keep going as far as you can. One more little tiny one on the end, otherwise it doesn't look like a circle. You can just see I'm angling that stitch, my needle in a bit now with that stitch, just to tuck that one nice and tight. And then you can come back to the middle and go the other way. I've got a bit more thread, I'll get another couple of stitches out of that, one stitch maybe. Down on the other side. You can finish that off in the middle because I won't see it. Carry on with this one now. This is a little bit like the Rhodes in that it will be quite thick on the back as well. There's a lot of thread on the back, so you can do the same thing, and that you can go down on that side and come up next to it and go back across this side, so you don't get that thread on the back as well. So if the amount of thread you have is an issue, this is a good way to use slightly less of it. I do find it's a bit harder to make that edge nice and neat. Last stitch in, just angle that needle in just to tuck that last one in nice and tightly, and just turn your frame over and finish your thread underneath some of the stitches on the way back. So that's a nice smooth satin stitch. I'm going to do a decorative one for the last one, so I'm going to do some woven wheels. So I'm going to put some spokes in first. So if you're weaving something, you need an odd number of spokes. It doesn't matter whether it's 5 or 7, but an odd number. So the easiest way is to do a little upside down Y and then just halve that shape like so. They don't need to be really precise. This will all get covered, so you can start your thread inside the shape. And I'm just going to put the spokes in, so up on the outside edge, down into the centre. These are always going to come from the outside and down into the centre. going to do 5 spokes, like so. Just going to finish that thread off. I'm not going to cut it off because I'm going to use that in a minute. I'm just going to park that there. And this stitch is really nice to use a couple of colours in. I'll show you that here. So I'm just starting a little pink one. Right, I'm going to come up right near the centre of those spokes. Not going through them, but as close to the centre as you can. We're just going to weave this thread in and out. Now this is easiest if you turn the needle around, because the point of the needle gets caught in the thread. So turn it around and use the eye, and we're going to go over the first spoke and under the second one. Over the third and under the fourth. So you're just going over and under each time, so just weaving. I'm just going to pull that quite tightly. You can choose how much tension you put on this, so you can have a nice tightly woven wheel, or you can have a nice loose one. So over and under, because we've got an odd number of spokes now, I'm going under the one that I previously went over. I'm just going to put a dark pink centre in. Around a couple more times, and I'm going to change colour back to that purple one. So one more, and then to finish it off would be going over that spoke, so I'll just come over it and take the needle through to the back. That out the way, bring in my other colour. So you want to start this one where you finished the last one, so we went over there. We would now come under this one, over and under, and back round with our weaving. You need to ease off on the tension a little bit as you get further to the edge, because otherwise it will all just bunch up towards the middle. So don't pull them quite as tightly the further out you come. They make really great flowers, little roses, these. You can see that shape filling in quite quickly now. And go right up to the edge of the circle. And just make sure the whole edge is covered. If not, you can just put a little stitch in, come out from underneath, slide your needle back in, and that just put like another little stitch in just to cover anything that's still showing. You usually have to put more stitches in than you think for these. Put one more there, one more around the top. That's our finished woven wheel. So really nice textured one. You can get lots of colour variations. You can use lots of colours, as many colours as you like in these. So a really beautiful textured one to finish with. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Do check out our other ones in this series. We've got stitches for outlines and stitches for lettering, and you can see them all in our playlist over here. And check out our other videos, and don't forget to like and subscribe as well.